What's up? It's Marcus Osborne here. I am with Dr. Michael Laurent. Welcome to the very first episode of Black Couples Lives Matter. I am a 25-year media professional of radio, television, print, and digital. And that distinguished gentleman in the blue shirt is Dr. Michael Laurent, PhD, licensed psychologist whose 40-year career has seen him help thousands of couples in couples therapy. And also, he specializes in Black men's mental health. This show is the creation of Dr. Laurent. He retired, moved to New Orleans, and he's decided that he doesn't want to quite hang up the mantle. We want to hang up the doctorate just yet. You want to keep on helping people and teaching people, right, Doc?
Right. I can't shut up.
All right, so we're going to jump into things. Now, the way the show is going to operate, we're going to try to pull something from the headlines every week because there's things that the general public talks about. We'll jump into it too. And what you should know is Dr. Mike is not a man who suffers fools lightly. And we will probably disagree on a bunch of things from time to time, but that's the way life goes. But let's jump into the biggest story, at least in terms of couples news over the past few weeks, is this Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith story. I am constantly fascinated by, and I mean, this is why I got into journalism in the first place, is because I'm interested in human beings, the human condition, the reasons that people do what they do, not necessarily the actual action itself, but generally speaking, the motivations for human beings. And I find that people's motivations as couples are endlessly fascinating. So, and Dr. Mike, he's like, this is all bullshit. So we'll have that discussion. And Mike, why don't you talk about what is it about this issue that drives you insane?
Well, I think I mentioned it to you before, is that I was allergic to even the topic. I mean, I thought we would just handle something a lot more academic and then just across the board. But it was, oh my God, don't do this to me. Not Will and Jada. I mean, I'm losing hair, but look. I'm losing more hair over Will on this side and then Jada on this side. And it's just that, this is where you and I, I guess we'll come up with some kind of bridge between the media and a bridge between what happens in a quiet, intimate, confidential therapy room. And that's really going to be the thing here, is because I don't work on TV normally. I work in a closed room with a couple, and it's just the three of us. And
this is going to be really fascinating because if I were the therapist for Will and Jada, I think I would have a field day with these two, just trying to figure out exactly what the hell is going on here. Well, let me ask you, though. Let me ask you directly. What is it about a couple that's been together for as long as these two have been? What are some of the things that couples encounter? Why do they diverge and drift off? Things go, there's a honeymoon stage. Obviously, you fall in love, you get married, and you end up being, or you don't get married, but you're together for decades. And then at some point, this weird thing happens. I guess it's not that weird. But this thing happens where they start to diverge. What usually precipitates these things?
Well, I think for a lot of couples is that they do find somehow that compatible person or person that they can kind of feed off of. And a lot of couples do that in a healthy way. But sometimes there are some couples where they feed and off of each other, but in the wrong way. And I think I mentioned this somewhere, but there is something called folie à deux. That's a delusion shared by two people. That's
folie à deux?
Folie à deux. It's a French term. It used to be a clinical diagnosis, but it used to be a diagnosis for somehow couples who find each other and there's so much craziness that they feed off of. So it's kind of like if one person says, well, I see spaceships coming in, and then the other person they just happen to meet is like, oh, I see spaceships too. And it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes people do hook up with those people that just cause, something different than the average person. So maybe the average person would have said, see ya, I'm out of here. Or case closed, or I'm getting a divorce, or I'm leaving. They're not taking the steps as, say, the typical couples who would have gone, by now. But there is something that is probably keeping them together, that's making them feed off of each other.
Do you think it sounds, honestly, it sounds like an addiction? Is that what it is? Is that the?
I think so. It's sort of like, if they could just have that kind of therapy, alone, not on the tabloids, not on NBC, not with a copy. If they could have that kind of therapy, together, I would really pray for them and just want them to really, kind of like, look at each other for the healing. But it's blown up. It's in everybody's living room. I don't know. I couldn't survive that. I don't know if you could survive that. Could you survive that? And you and your wife and you got what's going on at home is on TV.
Yeah, no, I couldn't. I not only could I not survive it, I would not want that. But let me ask you this though.
Yeah,
I'm also not a celebrity. I'm also not one of the most popular human beings on the face of the planet. So
I've seen your resume.
I guess my question to you is, Doc, is that a unique? Does it have how much of a unique effect does that type of outside popularity and pressure have on a relationship?
It's a lot. And I've always admired, celebrities. I admire.
You've worked with a few celebrities.
I've worked with a few in private, but it's all confidential. I would never be on CNN saying, guess what happened, when, with what's going on with, Denzel Washington and, not that you see me, but I would never be sharing that, because it kind of destroys the fact that he's going, somewhere private to work on that stuff. So
if you were their therapist, and if you saw this stuff going on and you're their therapist, what would you be saying to them right now? Would you be like, guys, pull it back, get out of the public spot? Okay.
Yes. I would say, look, move that red table talk out of your house. Move that red table out of the house, because what they may be doing and what she may be doing is taking those little snippets of therapy and turning it into reality TV. And that's the part that just really kind of grinds at a licensed psychologist, because a licensed psychologist, like, this is like a reality show. This really has the elements of a reality show.
What's the danger in that though? Like, what's the danger in saying, okay, well, we're seeing our therapist, but now I'm going to go talk about everything to the world. What's the actual danger to the relationship?
Concentration. You're not concentrating on that one person that you have to go home with. You're concentrating on the image, the book, the interviews, the questions, the memes, the follow-ups, and everybody else's opinion. Everybody's going to get in on this. And again, Marcus, if you and your wife are going through that, it would just.
I would never.
Could you imagine? No personal, no private life, and if you choose to be out there and then just go on a different dating show every week and have a different relationship every week, then that's fine. You can have the news coverage, follow you around. But if you're going home to a private relationship, how you gonna work on it?
I agree, man.
Work on it. If your business is all over the street and people know. I saw Will Smith's reaction, how he was the last to know some of this stuff.
Well, this is also one of the interesting things about this thing is that when you are in the public eye, you've already got a bunch of people who are pulling at you, maybe even exposing some of your secrets, even though they're supposed to be your friends. They're running around telling the tabloids this or half-truths, whatever. The other part to this is that you never get the entire picture. You get bits and pieces of misinformation, half-truths. You got the two competing books. I think I told you I read Will Smith's book. His upbringing was really difficult. And the bits that I've read from Jada's book, also extremely difficult childhoods. And I'm like, the problem with this that I see is that folks don't really read those books. They just look for the most salacious aspects of that, and then they take that whole thing off and run off as gospel. There's a lot of missing nuance and all this stuff. And so I feel some sympathy for the misunderstanding, but I don't feel bad that they're going through all of the blowback, because I hate to say it, when you put yourself out there, when you write these books, as a reporter, people would say to me, Marcus, you shouldn't be asking these questions. But I'm like, listen, as a reporter, as a journalist, if you're promoting a book and you want me to interview you, I'm going to ask you about the things that are in the book. My job as a journalist is to try to be as fair and objective and as non-judgmental as possible. But be honest, like, everybody's going to know your business, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't get mad about it, right?
That's right. That's right. And so I don't know. And where my heart does go out to? Those kids, the children.
Yeah, dude. That's a really good point. How do you think it affects these kids?
I don't, it's just, there's your mother and you're your father, and I don't know if I'm with him, and we're not there, and we think we're here, and we did it, and that. Kids have a hard enough time trying to make sense of this world.
Yeah.
And adults should be held responsible for making sure the kids aren't more screwed up than they actually might be.
Yeah.
And so, what your obligation as a parent is to make life safe for those children that are following you. And so the interesting thing about them was everybody thought the kids were crazy because they were dressing all kind of kooky and, all hip and, punkish, and they were into this and whatever. But, just looking at it from a distance, it's the children that really have to be shaking their heads and suffering the most from it. Adults, you're old enough to make your own mistakes. Okay. So, if they were single, if they didn't have kids and they just wanted to do what they wanted to do, then, God bless, whatever.
Yeah. Well, listen, I definitely do not take joy in any of the stuff that's going on. I think it's very tough, as you said, particularly on these kids, even though they're all grown now. But still, I think that the stuff that was going on behind the scenes for at least the last 10 years has probably affected them. I know that it affected Willow. She went and cut her hair off. She was a big star, and then they literally quit a tour right in the middle of a tour because she was like, Dad, I can't do this anymore. So he cut the tour short. So I guess my only feeling is I hope that everybody's okay emotionally eventually. And if it all works out in the end, who cares how they got there, I guess, right?
God bless.
I want to switch gears a little bit. This is I found this a couple of weeks ago, and I really want to get your thoughts on it. Basically, this therapist says women abruptly quit therapy when they have to take accountability. So I checked it. I'm gonna play this. You listen to it and you tell me what you think.
And women can't be held accountable. And I began to really think deeply about this idea. And one of the things that came across my mind is, in the last 9 months or so of me being in my private practice, I have myself experienced many women, whether they came as a couple or they came by themselves, they very abruptly discontinued their therapy. And I started to reflect and really think, what was going on here? And I noticed that after I had to confront them about something, I had to bring to their attention something they were doing that wasn't contributing to the health of the relationship, they became very defensive and very, just very harsh, and they stopped coming. And even though the husband would continue to come, he made it very clear that, she won't apologize. She thinks you're wrong. She thinks you're taking my side. And I began to really reflect, like, oh my gosh, is it true that women don't apologize? Is it that?
What do you think about that, Doc? Because as a guy, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, it is hard for women to admit that they're wrong. But maybe that's just me. I don't know. You tell me. Do you see this in your practice? Did you see this in your practice ever? Or
well, the thing is that it's hard to generalize, and I know
obviously,
thing to say it's hard to generalize.
Listen, here's what I say about generalizations, Doc.
Yes.
Generalizations are just generalizations, but generalizations can also be true.
Yeah, but but you asked me in my practice.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
my
yeah.
practice, and I don't know how long the other therapists have been practicing, but in my long practice, it's the other way around. I've seen
Guys.
it where is that the guys were the ones that being drug in. Guys
Hmm.
were the ones calling me up for the appointment, verifying the appointment, making sure what the address was. They were like, you know, followed, being forced to come in. And even a lot of guys that I see that are mandated by courts, or, there's some kind of outside influence. So I didn't see it so much where women were the ones were reluctant to get help or reluctant to apologize. I saw with a lot of men having some issues. So I don't know if we interchange the pieces. Let's say,
Yeah.
for instance, if you had a male therapist and you had the couple, would that dynamic be different? Or, it could
Interesting.
be that the woman was reacting to the woman therapist. Was there some kind of competition going on
Ah,
there?
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
In therapy, we have something called transference and countertransference.
Explain that to people, please.
Okay. Transference, I teach in my classes. Transference is when your clients look at you, Marcus, my therapist, and you represent something to me. So, in other words, you're coming at me, you're talking to me like you're my mother, you're talking to me like my father, you're
Yeah.
talking to me like my sister, my brother. So, you represent something to me as the client. That's transference. Countertransference is the opposite. It's where the therapist has someone like Marcus and you represent something to me.
Ah,
You represent my brother. You represent my dad. You represent it. So, what happens in a therapy session is that you get transference and countertransference, and the people are talking to each other. And the difficulty is because one sees the other as representing something else in their life.
and I'm sure that makes the communication and resolution stuff really, really difficult because that person is seeing you as someone else and not as the person you are. They've already made up their mind that you're just like blah blah blah, and they're not
That's
dealing with you. That's funny.
that's
I think that probably occurs in couples too, because I mean there's been many occasions where I've even had my wife tell me that, we've had an argument. She go, you're just like my dad. I'm like, no, I'm not just like your dad. But I get it because there may be a situation that was similar to one that she went through,
Mhm.
and then that reminds her of something that happened with her dad. But I'm not that dad. Well, how do it's interesting you say therapists do it. How do therapists deal with that? How do they combat that type of thing?
That's a good question, because I test my students on that all the time.
Hmm.
Is that definitely you want to work on a client's transference in the session. So, for instance, if I'm coming across Marcus like your dad or whatever, or if you're having some kind of difficulty talking to me, then I might want to play with that, and I might want to say, how do you see me? Do
Uh,
I come across in a way where does this remind you of anything? Or I noticed the last session, last time we talked, it just some things were coming across. What I don't do as a therapist, I don't work on my stuff with the client. So you work on the transference, you don't work on the countertransference in the session. I don't say, Marcus, you know what? You remind me of this person who was abusive to me, who was
hmm.
really harsh for me.
But how do you
Why?
deal with that though?
Well,
If
you
you're the
don't deal with
therapist,
that. First of all, you don't deal with it because why do you have to go home and think about this guy just said I look like or I act like this abuser guy? What is wrong with him? So I don't work on my stuff in the therapy session with the client. But if I have that stuff, I'm going to go to my person. And I know we've talked about that show that I really like. It's called Couples Therapy,
yeah, yeah,
where the therapist has a therapist.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the therapist, that's where she cleans up that stuff. She
yeah.
goes
She
to that.
actually has like a group of people helping her,
She
right? Yeah,
does.
yeah.
And that's where you clean yourself of that stuff. But you
But how do
don't.
you recognize it though, Doc? If you're in the middle of it, how do you recognize it in yourself? Like, how do I recognize that in if I'm transferring something to my partner, how do I recognize it? And how do I mean, obviously, if I recognize it, I can put a stop to
Yeah,
it. But how do I
yeah.
recognize it?
Well, if it's between partners or in the relationship, that's one thing. I think we were talking about the relationship between the
Yeah.
therapist and the
Yeah.
client.
Yeah.
So that those are
Okay.
different things. But let's just say if we're talking about a couple, you
Okay.
know, person to person inside the relationship, then I think getting them together and having them say, you know, hey, look, or the therapist saying, hey, look, does this remind you of anything? And having the person let it out of their mouth that, you know, you do act like my father, you do act like, you know, my brother, you do act like this other person that I had a bad experience with. And then once it comes out of the mouth, then you can work with it. Then you can say, well, is that fair? And then they can actually realize once it's out. But this whole transference and counter transference stuff is stuff that comes from within, that's projected onto somebody else, and then it gets messed up.
Yeah.
So in a therapy session, you would just say, well, what's up with that? And why did you react that way? You know, and it could be what's happening in that situation with that you play the clip with the therapist and the client. The
Yeah.
woman may have had some transference issue, and then the therapist may have had some counter transference issue with that woman.
That makes sense. That's fascinating stuff. I could talk about that all day because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do think that happens more than we probably recognize. I feel like that's a fairly common thing in
Yeah.
therapy, right? Isn't it? Or am I losing my
It
mind?
is, but you know, I have to say that I have sworn to the Psychodynamic Club of America. So all of us Freudians, all those people see the law therapists that never even studied Freud, and I studied Freud. So if I've taken in all that psychodynamic, and then on couples therapy, that TV show, I think I mentioned it to you, is
Yeah.
that she's very psychodynamic. And so
What
if
is
you
it now? What does it mean when you say someone's psychodynamic? What does that mean?
psychodynamic comes from Freud. So it means is that everything's part of the unconscious. Everything is coming from you that's getting projected on someone else. So we were calling it transference and transferring, but it's all about projection. What's coming in from my unconscious is being dumped onto that other person. And so that's different from the cognitive behavioral therapist that's just going to work on, okay, you be nice, shake hands, okay, you know, happy family, that kind of thing. Is that there's psychodynamics, something is about the unconscious. And that's what's bringing up this stuff about why I can't talk to you, Marcus, because you represent something that happened, you know, a while ago that is kept in my unconscious.
Now, and if you're on the receiving end of that transference, how do you manage it?
You if you're a couple and they're doing it to each other, you talk about, you expose that. And
Yeah.
I think for a lot of couples, just saying it, you know, I mean, you know, if your wife says to you, you know, you're just like my father. Well, after she sits and thinks about what came out of her mouth, she knows you don't look exactly like her father. Okay. So I met your lovely wife. And you know, and he said, but it's just that people need time not to just deal with it in therapy, but to work it out in their own head.
Yeah.
For her to
Yeah.
actually say that, she's going to have to, you know, work on it and kind of stir it up for a while and just, you know, but people can do that once they can kind of admit it to themselves and admit it to their partner.
So basically, what you're saying here is this woman may or may not actually have a bunch of lady clients who are, not willing to admit that they are wrong or apologize.
Yeah.
All of this stuff is sort of anecdotal.
Yeah. And who knows? Oh, you kind of froze there. Okay, I see you freezing. Okay. All right, there you go. But yeah, because just from my experiences, it's possible that other therapists would have had a different outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
just a different mix.
I'd like to close with some wisdom, some advice from your end, and I just want to leave people with something that maybe they can take into their own lives and use in their, sort of daily relationship and interactions with other folks. The idea of resolving conflict without agreeing with your partner, I think that's a huge deal, because I've had disagreements with people Well, they'll go, well, you don't understand my point of view. And I'm like, no, I understand. I just don't agree. And then they'll go, well, if you understood, you would agree. Like, nah, I really don't. I understand your point. I just don't agree with you. How do you manage that sort of minefield?
Okay, if you're talking about couples, then you have to have ground rules. Okay, you have to have, safety rules. We don't get mad at each other and throw things. We don't hit each other. We don't do, all kind of. We just there are rules. There are rules to a marriage beyond just getting married. So you have to have the ability to say, okay, no matter what we disagree upon, we're always going to be together, and we're on the same side.
Right.
So the having those things, those messages in the back of your head. The other things that may be distractions, well, my wife doesn't like the kind of TV programs that I like.
She doesn't.
She doesn't.
No, she doesn't. We like a lot of the same stuff. We like a lot of the same stuff.
She doesn't have to. There's no need to get into a fight. And if you have those kind of things kind of agreed upon, if you shake and say, okay, we are going to go to bed and we're not going to, I forgot what the saying is exactly. It said, don't let the sun go down on an argument.
I've never heard it, but that sounds good to me.
It's it. It's it. It's the moral advice that a lot of couples have had. So no matter what you fight about, what you argue about, what recently happened that caused them crazy, what you do, Marcus, is before your wife goes to bed, you say, come here, come here. And you put your arms around them. And it doesn't mean that I'm right, you're right, I won, you won, I'm going to change, you're going to like my programs. It doesn't mean that. It means that, come here, come here.
Yeah, but what do you do when that person says, nope, I don't want to, I'm going to be mad?
Then they've got some work to do, and that happens. People do hold grudges to it, but you need to actually talk as a couple. And I think the best time to do it is when you're not in the middle of an argument. So, for instance, I've
learned that.
Yeah, I know, because if she wants to kill you, then Marcus, then you can't just say, "Come here, come here." It's like, no, you're covering up my feeling. I have a valid reason to be upset, blah, 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 blah. So in those quiet, calm states, there's got to be some rules in terms of, as long as we're going to be sharing this bed, as long as we're going to be in the same room, we got to be able to just kind of like, just not make it go away, but just agree that our being together is more important than our fight.
And then that typically works. I feel like this is a lot easier said than done, Doc. I feel like it's easier to say, because when somebody really, there's some people who take being agreed with so personally. Yeah. I don't take that stuff personally. I don't care if people agree with me. It doesn't bother me because that's life.
I like,
you know what I mean?
I like diversity. I like
exactly. So I'm like, and a lot of times my own opinion is wrong. I'm fine with that too. But there are definitely people who go, if you don't agree with me, something's wrong with you. And if you don't agree with my perspective, something's wrong with you. And you don't understand where I'm coming from, because if you understood where I was coming from, then you would agree with me. How do you deal with that?
Okay. Well, the thing is that if you are in a committed relationship, it is your job to make sure that your home is safe and that you have peace in your home. You've got to. Now, if we're talking about you, Marcus, and just some stranger on Canal and Claiborne, you're just like, I don't like your program, I don't like yours. Then, you give each other the middle finger and then you go away. Okay. It's over.
Yeah.
But not for the person that lives in your house.
Yeah.
Whatever the conflict may be, you can continue that. You can just say, come here, we'll pick this up tomorrow. Okay, that'll be on the old business for our agenda for tomorrow. But for right now, we've got to sleep under the same home.
Yeah, it's just got to get to a point where, what is it that Barack Obama used to say? We can disagree without being disagreeable. Like, it's fine. We don't have to agree on this, but it's not a personal thing.
Right.
It's not a judgment. My disagreeing with you is not a value judgment on you as a human being. It's just my personal constitution. I feel this way.
Mhm. And
All
again,
right.
I'm trying to make a distinction between strangers having a conflict
Yeah.
and your significant other having this conflict. There's a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I think that's going to do it for us. That's Dr. Michael Laurent. I am Marcus Osborne. Please check out the YouTube page. The YouTube channel is blackcouplesLivesMatter.com. I shouldn't say .com. That's the website. The website is blackcouplesLivesMatter.com. The YouTube channel is Black Couples Lives Matter. That is Dr. Michael Laurent. Find him on Facebook, Dr. Michael Laurent. And let's grow this thing. Let's get some folks in here. If you've got questions, comments, concerns, the doc is all over the socials, and you know what? I'll post the socials below this video, so you can reach out to Doc, and we'll get some folks on here. Maybe we'll invite some guests in to ask some questions live to Dr. Michael Laurent. Let's do some real stuff. Let's help some folks, and also to the brothers out there, Dr. Mike is really, really, really big on Black men's mental health, and I want to make sure these cats out here know that that is also an invitation to you to jump in here and ask your questions as well. And there's no topic off limits. The man has been around and doing it for 40 years. Ask what you want, or as Digital Underground used to say, do what you like. And that is it for us. We'll catch you next week. Thanks.